Dear younger me, if I could sit across the room from myself when I was a little bit younger, I would say leadership is a lot more about the work than it is about the position, the title, or God's calling. If you've learned the same thing, stick around. Welcome back to Faith in the Living Room. This is where we try to slow things down a bit, talk honestly to each other about following Christ in our real lives. This is not from the platform. Usually this is from the couch. Living room is occupied tonight, so I am recording in the back room. But I just want to talk about something that I guess I came upon kind of the hard way. It was not something that I figured out real quick, and not something that I've practiced well over the course of my time in ministry as a pastor, as a father, or even as a husband. So this is really to any position of leadership. If you're a lady, this would apply to your position as a wife and as a mother as well. And so it's really when I was preaching on Sunday, we were preaching I'm in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, about verse 12 or verse 13 there, where Paul says to esteem those who are over you for their work's sake, and made the bell go off in my head, and made, sometimes a certain thought comes along, right? God puts you're reading the scripture and you're reading that, and all of a sudden, right, that verse suddenly makes sense to you. And that's how it kind of struck me, even on Sunday as I was standing behind the pulpit even. I thought to myself, man, I could just preach on this for probably the next 4 hours. I've got a lot of experience in the desire to be esteemed for my position, for my title, and not so much for my work. So here's kind of how I used to see leadership. So I started out in ministry very, very young. I was about 19 years old, I guess, and made a bus captain, became the youth pastor as well for a little while. Eventually, obviously, worked my way up to being an assistant pastor, moved away, started a small church, and then came back to the church that I had gone out of to start that church. Worked there for a little while, then moved from there to another state, to work in another state as an assistant pastor. Did that for a while, had some issues, marital problems, stuff like that. That were not my wife's fault, were my fault as a result of my own personal actions. And eventually, I worked my way up into being a pastor, came back and worked again, was out of ministry for a while, worked in the secular workforce, came back into ministry. For a while, it was being an assistant pastor, youth man, bus captain, as well as working a full-time job. Then went full-time at the church, and then went back from being full-time at the church back into the workforce. All of that to say that I equated leadership for a long time with, I had been given a position by the pastor of the church. I had been affirmed as that by the church as an assistant pastor, youth man, bus captain, whatever it was. And I put this in air quotes, appointed by God, or some people would say called by God, and had that kind of feeling that, you should respect my position, my title, and my calling. But basically, if I had to sum it all up, I thought to myself, because of my position, my title, people should respect me. But somewhere along the way, God kicked my teeth in a few times. And obviously Scripture comes in, experience comes in, and you learn some things. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12 and verse 13, which is where we were on Sunday, he says this: "We beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you, and are over you in the Lord, and admonish you to esteem them very highly in love, for their work's sake." Not just to esteem them very highly in love, but for their work's sake, and be at peace among yourselves. Paul does not say this. Paul does not say respect their position, or respect their title. We live in a day and age where we're told to do that, right? Should respect the president because he's the president. You should respect the governor because he's the governor. You should respect pastors because they're pastors. But that's not the way Scripture lays it out. Scripture lays it out that it's for your work's sake. It's based on that work. And if I'm honest, I shouldn't have been respected for my work's sake. A, I didn't have enough time in work to be respected for it. B, my efforts were not always respectable efforts. And there's been some times in my life where I've even fallen into sin as a result, and that proved my efforts were not respectable efforts. And so respect is connected to labor in the Scripture and not to your label, right? And so people should be able to see your effort. Effort is visible, and you esteem people because of their effort, because you see what they are doing, because they come alongside you and they share that burden. The Bible tells us that we shouldn't be unequally yoked, but that we should be in a yoke with the Lord, and we should be in a yoke with fellow believers. And as pastors, as leaders in a church, that's what you want people to be. You want that pastor not to be cracking the whip over your head, but to be in the yoke with you. Same thing in a family relationship, in a husband and wife relationship. Doesn't work well if the husband is just cracking his whip over the head of the wife. He's got to get in the yoke with her, and they've got to pull together. There's that shared commitment and that shared burden. Both people have to have something invested. Oftentimes, I think as pastors and in leadership, actually, I'm not going to say that as pastors and in leadership. I want to speak for myself. I'll just speak on my own history. Oftentimes, over the course of my time in ministry, I have not had any skin in the game. I was on top of it, right? I was at the top of it and just point, direct, crack the whip, tell people what to do, but I had no skin in the game. I wasn't invested in the work. And so I was not involved. It wasn't costing me anything to be involved. And there was no relationship between me and the people that I pastored. And that it is very difficult to be esteemed or to esteem somebody who has no relationship with you. And if you're a pastor that is listening to this, I would encourage you that oftentimes as pastors, we hear things like you can't be friends with your people and those types of things, or you can't let your people get too close to you. You hear a lot of that kind of stuff, but I think that stuff is inaccurate. I think the only way to lead is for people to be close to you, and I think the only way to be esteemed, like the Scripture says here, to be esteemed highly and loved for your work's sake, is for you to be in a relationship with the people that you are pastoring. And that may mean that you can't pastor as many people as you would like to pastor. It may mean that you've got to reduce the number of people that you can pastor. And maybe you have you have a capacity to pastor more people than somebody else does. But if you don't have that relationship, there's no reason for them, there is no command for them, there is no call for them to esteem you highly in love for your work's sake. And so early in my ministry, I really wanted to be respected because of my position, and really relied on my position to provide me with respect, and learned my lesson. After a long time in ministry, God tore everything in my ministry and my life apart. And when I got back into trying to really just try to put things back on track and work my way through my problems and the problems that existed as a result we had a church split, we've had a lot of things go on. I realized that I couldn't rely on me pushing people out to work, that I needed to do the work. I needed to get in the trench and share that burden, and quit demanding honor from people, and quit demanding that they respect my position. Zane Hodges, who's a pastor and writer, wrote this. He said, "Christian leadership is not about asserting authority, but about drawing others closer to Christ through grace." And that flows naturally, by the way, from Scripture. I'll give you some Scripture to back up what he's saying there. Mark chapter 10, verse 42, he's down through verse number 45. I'll just read this real quick. But Jesus called them to him and saith unto them, Ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. And I would have to say that the early part of my ministry, I was not giving my life like Christ had given his life. I was not committed like Christ was committed. I was not in that relationship, in that working relationship with my people. It was me doing work and them doing work, and those two things being separate, honestly, from one another. And so Jesus redefines leadership. Before Paul ever writes Thessalonians, Christ has said this. And so, listen, authority in Scripture flows down, right? And so we're supposed to work with these people. My job as a pastor is not to be the Lord of the church, or to be the to be the commander-in-chief of the church. My job as the pastor is very simple, and that is, my job as the pastor is to get in the trenches and to help people and work alongside people to help them to become the believer that God would have them to be. And while I help them become the believer that God would have them to be, they're helping me become the pastor and the leader and the believer that God would have me to be. We are in this together. When you demand esteem from people, when you demand their respect, you create a barrier between them, between them and you. And I learned this, I guess, the hard way, however you want to put it, but pushing people to recognize me as their pastor, pushing people to recognize me as an authority, as, listen, it's my way or the highway, that kind of thing, did nothing but create tension between me and others, some of which still exists to this day, I'm sure, with some people, and I can't blame them, right? It ends conversations, right? You can win the argument, but you don't win the person. And it prevented legitimate problems from being addressed that probably would have saved, even kept me out of some of the sin problems that I ended up in as a result of it. And so, listen, out of all of that, we ended up with church conflict. Right, my pride was certainly a massive part of the situation. I don't take responsibility for all of the situation. Don't take responsibility for other people's sin. I can only take responsibility for my sin. But my pride overwhelmed me, and you become vulnerable to the attacks of the devil as a result of it, and that is certainly what happened to me. And so, when leadership puts themselves on a pedestal, they become very, very fragile. And that is what I was. I was very fragile, and the devil, God combined, I guess, proved that to me. Charles Spurgeon once said, humility is to make a right estimate of oneself. We are servants, not masters. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2 and verse 3, Peter says, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. And that is really right in line, right, with what we're talking about here, because Peter warns against the exact same mistake that a lot of leaders fall into. The word filthy lucre, most of the time we associate that with money, with finances. But it's really just material gain of any kind. And material gain of any kind can be even things like the supporting your ego, right? Or building up your pride, right? Doing things that just for yourself. And that's really what filthy lucre is. And certainly that's the trap that I fell into. And people follow people will follow those examples a long time before they ever follow your explanation or your correction, right? They follow that example. And so, listen, to work requires some things, right? To work means you've got to humble yourself. You got to be patient. You got to be present in order to work. It's kind of like it's like like a garden, right? As leaders, we aren't just we're not just supposed to stand there and scream at the plants to grow, right? We've got to get our hands dirty, and you've got to get down and pull weeds, and you've got to help that plant to grow. And that's how you've got to see this thing of leadership. Is it's my job to look at those who God's given me, whether I'm a father, whether I'm a mother, whether I am a pastor, or or a husband, whatever it is, right? That God's given me this relationship to grow, and that means I've got to get my hands dirty. I've got to work at this thing, and your direction matters, right? But if you arrive at the destination that you so desperately desire as a leader, but you arrive alone, you've not accomplished much. And that's certainly the direction that I ended up going in my leadership as a young man. If you, Dr. Paul Chappell in Lancaster says, leadership is not a position or power. It's in the influence of a Christ-like example. That's what we want to be. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 and verse 4, Paul says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Paul tells us that we ought to be humble, be lowly of mind. And that is, if you're in any position of leadership, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a mother, you are a pastor, you're whatever position of leadership you have, you should be lowly of mind. And looking back at myself as a young pastor, young man, if I could sit down across the table from that guy, I would slap him into next week, right? But if I could sit down across the table from myself, that's really what I'd want to communicate to myself is, listen, you want to be lowly of mind. You want to be humble and express humility, show humility. You want to live a humble life. Respect grows in environments where people feel like you are in this thing with them, like you're in the fight with them. So listen, there is a better way forward as a leader. You don't have to... people will respect your testimony much more than they will respect your title. And people are looking for you to be available to them more than they're looking for you to be an authority in their life. And they just want you to participate in this thing with them, to help them move towards the goal of being the believer that God has called them to be. They want that way more than they want a pastor, right? Your position as a pastor. That isn't to say that we don't have a calling as a pastor and that we don't have a job as a pastor. We don't have a duty as a pastor or a responsibility as a pastor. But it means that if we want to be esteemed very highly in love for our work's sake, like 1 Thessalonians tells us, then we need to do work that's worthy of being esteemed very highly in love. Ask yourself, if you were under your leadership, would you esteem you very highly in love? I can tell you, in honest reflection, I would not have esteemed myself very highly in love. I wanted to esteem myself very highly in love as a husband. I feel sorry for my wife. I would not have esteemed myself very highly in love as one of my children, as a young father, right? And I get it. You learn and you grow and all that kind of stuff. But I would not have esteemed myself very highly in love as a father. I made lots of mistakes in the relationship between me and my children. More in my children who are older now than in my younger children. And my older children tell me about it all the time. But right, I made plenty of mistakes there because I was demanding the respect for my position, my title, rather than because I loved them and I was here to help them be all that they could be for Christ. And so, listen, would you sit under your leadership? Do your people see you as a laborer, or do they see you for your role? Right? Listen, if you're a follower, if you're a member of our church or a member of any other church, I'd ask you to learn to recognize the work that pastors and those in spiritual leadership do. And as a wife, to realize what your husband is doing. As a child, to realize what your mother is doing for you. Right? To realize those things. Because if you've got a good husband who really does, he's trying to help you and trying to work alongside you to raise your children to be godly and to work alongside you to help you to be the wife that you should be, and he's trying hard to be the husband that he should be. If you've got those things, listen, I've been in and around ministry pretty much my whole life. I know very few pastors that make the money that they could make, or they should make, or whatever. Right? It's not to say that pastors are not paid well or anything else. There's some pastors out there that make pretty decent money, I guess, but it's to say, I don't think most pastors are paid the amount that they should be paid for the labor that they put in. And so I'd ask you to recognize that, right? And if you're a pastor, I would ask you if you're worthy of being esteemed very highly in love. Listen, respect grows when the work is shared, when your humility is visible, and your love is what does the talking. That's when respect, esteem grows. And so listen, if you're leading, I would tell you, ask yourself, do people see my title, or do they see how I work? And if you're following, I'd ask you, are you recognizing the faithfulness of your pastor, the faithfulness of your husband? Are you just seeing just their personality? We all have personality flaws. I've got them too. Listen, because that's how respect grows, right? Listen, thanks for spending a few minutes in the living room with me. Not the living room today, the back room. But listen, if this conversation has helped you, like, subscribe, share this with somebody that you feel like it would minister to, and be the witness that you can be for Christ.